Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Completionist. For this episode, guys, I thought one topic that would be really interesting is that I wanted to talk to you about what my favorite arcade game is. Now, the reason why I wanted to talk about this is one of the things that I have been doing since I've been home is I've actually been playing a lot of arcade games, through MAME. And for those that have been a part of my channel for a really, really long time, some of the first videos that I ever made is that I talked about arcade sessions, with my really good friend Matt. And he actually had MAME set up on his computer, and he actually spent the money on buying a professional X arcade stick. So, one of the things that, me and him we used to do is every weekend or every second weekend I would go over to his place and, we'd start going down through all the games in alphabetical order and favorite the ones that, that we liked the best. And I did two of these old arcade session videos, and it's how we came across some really hidden gem arcade games such as Opera Rush and Air Gallet. Now, about 4 to 5 years ago, I actually bought the X arcade stick off of my friend Matt. Even though he still loves video games, he didn't really have the space for it anymore, and now that he has a family, he doesn't really have a lot of free time to game anymore. So he knew that I loved playing arcade games, so he actually sold me the X arcade stick, and I've had it ever since. And he was nice enough to set up MAME on my wife's computer, and every once in a while, I'll go on MAME and I'll pick a different and I'll pick a random letter, and I'll start going down through the list and start picking out really enjoyable arcade games that I never had the opportunity to play. And so I've pretty much been an arcade kid all my life. Now, thankfully, arcades were very common in my area, especially in the 80s and the 90s. It seemed like any small Newfoundland community had an arcade or a takeout that had a couple of arcade games. But the problem with arcade games, especially in a very small community, was they were never brand new. They were usually 4, 5, 6 years older than their actual release date. If you wanted to go to the arcade that had the newest and current great arcade games, for me, you had to travel 5 hours away. And that didn't happen very often. I had to travel to a place called Corner Brook, and there used to be an arcade there at the Valley Mall called Fun Villa. And that was where you really had to go, to play the newest and greatest arcade games. And it was actually at the Fun Villa in Corner Brook where I got to experience my favorite arcade game of all time. And my favorite arcade game of all time, and you obviously know what it is because it's on the title, is G.I. Joe, the arcade game. And this is the arcade poster for it. This game came out in 1992 by Konami during Konami's arcade heyday. And this was one of the many games in which the 4-player arcade games were a huge thing. Back in the early to mid 1990s, you had, both Ninja Turtles arcade games, and you had, the Simpsons arcade game, and they were just really enjoyable experiences. And even though I was 11, 12, 13 years old when I got to experience a lot of these 4-player arcade games for the very first time, these were the arcade games that I felt the most comfortable playing as a kid. Because let's face it, arcade games are massive quarter suckers, and especially if you're a kid, you can never get very far on one quarter at all. And you really didn't want to waste your time, playing a solo game, regardless if it was a beat 'em up or an action platformer or a fighting game or anything along those lines, because it would only be a matter of time, and you'd have your ass handed to you. But I always felt that you got the best bang for your buck if you played one of these 4-player arcade games, because not only were you not playing by yourself, you were also playing with a bunch of other people, and that actually helped make the gaming experience that much more memorable. And it also helped make that quarter, make that 50 cents last a little bit longer, because it was always a team effort. And especially when these games first got released, it was probably the best experience you could ever have at an arcade, if you ask me, because you weren't trying to outcompete with the other person. You were all trying to work together to actually beat the game. And that just made it such a really fun experience, because as you're in the height of battle, you're trying to share strategies. Usually, you're playing with kids much older than you, and they're telling you what to do, or they'll handle a certain part of the level, or they know how to defeat a boss without taking a bunch of hits. And it just felt such a wonderful, memorable experience, because even though you didn't know each other, but for those 5 to 10 to 15 minutes that you were playing the game, that you felt like you were best friends, even though you were complete strangers. So why do I prefer G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, over the other 4-player arcade games that that Konami had made during that time? The reason why I prefer G.I. Joe is that I just think it's that much memorable. I think it's a game that is not that much of a time sink, especially since it only really has 6 levels. And to be honest, out of all the 4-player Konami games out there, and the other 4-player arcade games out there, I think it's probably one of the most fair. I don't consider G.I. Joe as much of a quarter sucker as as the Simpsons, or the TMNT games, or Bucky O'Hare, or all these other games that Konami had released. And deep down, I'm an 80s kid. I grew up on the 80s cartoons, even though Ninja Turtles came out in 1987, 88, 89. I'm not sure on the year, but it's just like I grew up on G.I. Joe and Transformers. That's what I grew up on. Even though, for as big as those shows were, it wasn't my favorite 80s cartoon. That will always be Mask, our Mobile Armored Strike Command. But it's just like everything about G.I. Joe was just an awesome experience. It's a third-person rail shooter, but everything about the game just felt incredibly epic, and it really felt fair, because a lot of the environments were completely destructible. You could destroy pipelines, air hangars, gas tanks, trees, rock pillars, just like everything that you could blow up, you can blow up in that game. And it's just like you actually got to fight enemies and vehicles and from the show, and they were toys as well. And it's just such a timeless, great, awesome experience. And it's just one of the things I really love about the game is I love the boss fights. They're based on actual Cobra villains, and every one of them is just so epic. It's just like they come onto the screen when you reach the end of the level, and they always have a really great badass saying, like, it's now or never, and don't make me mad, and that kind of thing. And it's just, and they had some really great villains in that arcade game. They had Tomax and Zammot, they had Metalhead, they had the Baroness, they had Destro, they had Major Blood, and obviously Cobra Commander. I think one of the slightly disappointing aspects is I don't think they used the same voice actors from the actual cartoon in the video game, but it didn't really deter from it. But it's just like, I think overall, I think the game is incredibly fair. And it's just that, sure, there's a lot of bullets, there's a lot of missiles coming your way, but it's just like, everything about the game just flows together so well. There's not a moment in the game that feels slow or tacked on. It just leads up to a really awesome experience. The funny thing regarding the G.I. Joe arcade game is that, especially playing it in the arcades, everyone always wanted to play Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes is always the coolest G.I. Joe. Nobody else wanted to play any of the other characters, but the slot for Snake Eyes was always taken, because obviously, he's one of the coolest characters, in the G.I. Joe universe. But it's so funny because Snake Eyes doesn't talk, but if he dies in the game and his next life kicks in, you hear him say, "Yo, Joe," but Snake Eyes doesn't really talk. So, but I just have a lot of memories, really playing that game. And I remember, playing it as a 12, 13-year-old kid. I never beat it, even though playing it with a bunch of other players. I think the furthest I ever got was in the cavern. But once MAME existed, and you could actually have access to the game, because it's never ever been released on console. It's never had a digital release, as far as I know. It's only ever available on the arcade. So I'm sure for a lot of kids who probably grew up in the 80s or 90s, I certainly hope that you had an opportunity to play this game like I did in the arcade. But if you didn't, I highly recommend you check it out. And when I actually type in G.I. Joe the arcade game, you see a lot of gameplay from it, but you don't see a lot of people talking about it. You don't see a lot of people review it. And I think it's kind of a crying shame, because I was reading a Wikipedia article on it, and it was actually like the 7th most popular arcade game in 1992. But yet I don't see many people talk about it. Usually when a lot of people talk about the Konami 4-player cabinets, they always talk about the Ninja Turtles or the Simpsons arcade game. But G.I. Joe the arcade game is definitely an experience that should not be missed, and it should be easily accessible. I know a lot of my gaming friends already have MAME or use MAME, and I highly recommend you guys check it out. And that's really all I have to say about it, guys. You can pretty much finish the game in about 30-35 minutes. I believe that the best part of the game are definitely the boss battles, because they're just that epic. Because for the most part, just about all the bosses have their own cool Cobra vehicle that they inhabit, that you actually fight them with. There's a few Cobra villains that you actually fight hand to hand without them being in a vehicle. You fight Metalhead, you fight Major Blood, and you fight Cobra Commander, solo, without them being in a vehicle at all. But the boss fights are definitely some of the best aspects of this game, and it's just a wonderful experience, hands down. So anyway, guys, as an extra treat, I'm going to show you some gameplay of G.I. Joe, and I'm going to show you my favorite level in the G.I. Joe arcade game, which is the Cobra weapons plant. So, look forward to the gameplay, and I'll see you there.
wait to see you. It's showtime.
So guys, the Baroness has finally been taken care of, but I really love this boss fight just because her combined with the Heavy Bomber is just an awesome experience, and it's definitely my favorite fight of the entire game. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching this gameplay, and as always, take care, and I wish you nothing but the best.